They thought stripping my title and tossing me into the snow for a 24-year-old mistress would erase me. Big mistake. They forgot that before I was a wife, I was the architect who designed the very heart of their $2 billion tower. Now, as I watch their stock plummet, they are about to learn a hard lesson. The price of betrayal is exactly $48 million, and I hold the only key to stop the bleeding. My name is Elena Vance, and tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of my 32 years on this earth. The crystal flutes clinked like wind chimes throughout the ballroom, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. I stood in the center of the gala, looking up at the vaulted ceiling of the Grandhurst Tower. It was a smart building worth $2 billion, a marvel of modern engineering, but only I knew that behind the marble and steel beat a heart I had created. I had spent 7 years writing the code for Aura, the operating system that made this place breathe. The applause thundered as my husband, Preston Grandhurst, stepped up to the podium. He looked dashing in his tuxedo, the very image of success. He held the crystal trophy for Visionary of the Year high above his head. My heart swelled. This was our moment. I could not have done this alone, Preston said into the microphone, his smile dazzling the cameras. I want to invite the person who inspires me every day, my true muse. I took a step forward, smoothing the silk of my gown, ready to take his hand. Come up here, Monica, Preston said. My foot froze mid-step. The room seemed to tilt. From the side of the stage, Monica, his 24-year-old secretary, glided out. She was wearing a red dress that looked suspiciously like a design I had sketched in my notebook 3 months ago. The crowd cheered, oblivious to my paralysis. I felt a cold, bony hand clamp down on my bare shoulder. Don't make a scene, Elena, a voice hissed in my ear. It's beneath us. I turned to see Victoria Grandhurst, my mother-in-law. Her face was a mask of icy composure. She gripped my arm tight enough to bruise and steered me forcibly toward a shadowed alcove away from the cameras. What is happening? I whispered, my voice trembling. Victoria. Why is she up there? The lawyers are waiting at the service entrance, Victoria said, not even looking at me. We are terminating your contract as creative director effective immediately. The papers cite a conflict of interest. We can't have you. Compromising the company integrity. Integrity, I choked out. Preston descended the stairs from the stage, holding Monica's hand, but he stopped when he saw us. He walked over, his face flushed with adrenaline and champagne. Preston, tell her this is a joke, I pleaded. He looked at his shoes, unable to meet my eyes. It's been 8 months. Elena, Monica is pregnant. I need a wife who is present. You're just so dry, so cold. You care more about your codes and your blueprints than you ever cared about me. I built this empire for you. I cried out, my voice cracking. I worked 18 hours a day to make you a king, and that is why you're boring, he muttered. He waved his hand at the security team. Get her out of here. She's upsetting Monica. 2 large guards, men whose Christmas bonuses I had signed off on personally, grabbed my arms. They did not drag me through the front door. They marched me through the kitchen, past the staring staff, and shoved me out the rear exit. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. I stood on the pavement. It was December in New York. The wind was a razor, and the snow was falling in thick, wet sheets. I was wearing a backless evening gown and strappy heels. No coat, no scarf, just a small clutch purse. I reached for my phone with numb fingers to call a car, but a notification flashed on the screen. Access denied. I checked my banking app, the joint account, the savings. Everything was frozen. The prenup I had signed, blinded by love and trust, had a clause about immediate freezing of assets pending investigation of corporate misconduct. They had planned this. Shivering violently, I walked 3 blocks to our residential building. I tried to punch in the code for the penthouse elevator. The screen blinked red invalid entry. I ran to the service desk, but the doorman looked away. Ashamed. "I can't let you up. Mrs. Grandhurst. Orders. Where are my things?" I asked, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely articulate the words. He pointed to the side of the lobby, near the trash room. My clothes, my sketchbooks, my life. Everything was shoved haphazardly into wet cardboard boxes. A bottle of expensive scotch had broken inside one, soaking my favorite cashmere sweater. I sat down on one of the soggy boxes, the snow blowing in through the revolving doors, chilling me to the marrow. My phone buzzed again. It was a push notification from a tabloid site. Grandhurst architect ousted in data theft scandal. Visionary CEO Preston Grandhurst finds comfort with new flame after wife's betrayal. I looked at the headline, then at my trembling hands. I had no home. I had $0 to my name. My reputation was being slaughtered in real time while they drank champagne in the tower I built. I was 32 years old, and I had been erased. The neon sign of the pawn shop in the Bronx flickered with a buzzing sound that grated against my nerves. I placed my wedding ring and the vintage Patek Philippe watch on the scratched glass counter. The watch had been a gift to myself after I secured the land deal for the South Tower. The ring had been a promise, now proven false. The pawnbroker, a man with grease under his fingernails, didn't even look up at me as he examined the diamond with a loupe. $3,000 for the lot, he grunted. That watch alone is worth $40,000, I said, my voice tight. And the ring is flawless platinum. You have to give me at least 10. He dropped the loupe and looked at me with dead eyes. You got no box, no papers, and you look like you haven't slept in 3 days. 3,000. Cash. Take it or get out. I took the cash. I had no leverage left. That money went straight into the deposit for a basement studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that rattled like a dying engine. I spent the next 2 weeks frantically applying to every architectural firm in the city. I was Elena Vance. My portfolio was legendary. Surely, talent would outweigh a tabloid scandal. I was wrong. At my 5th interview, the senior partner, a man I had once shared panels with at conferences, didn't even invite me to sit down. He just slid a printed email across his mahogany desk. It was an internal memo from the Grandhurst legal team, sent to every major firm in New York, warning them that hiring me would result in immediate litigation for complicity in data theft. "You are radioactive. Elena," he said, not unkindly, but with finality. "Preston has blacklisted you. If I hire you, he pulls his contracts. I can't risk my firm for you." By the end of the month, the $3,000 was gone. I learned quickly that pride is a luxury only the rich can afford. I stopped taking the subway to save the $2.90 per ride. I walked 5 miles a day in shoes that were never designed for pavement. I waited for the local bakery to throw out their day-old bagels at 9 in the evening so I could buy a bag for 50 cents. Hunger became a constant, dull ache in my stomach, but the fear of homelessness was sharper. I needed money. Any money. I found a job listing taped to a lamppost. A small logistics company in Queens needed night cleaners and warehouse sorters. No background check required. Cash in hand. The uniform was a shapeless blue jumpsuit that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner. My hands, which used to draft sensitive blueprints with millimeter precision, were now red and raw from bleach and scrubbing pads. Every night, I mopped floors in a building that was a cheap, ugly imitation of the structures I used to design. One Tuesday night, I was buffing the marble floor of the lobby. The rhythmic whir of the machine was hypnotic, allowing me to zone out. The elevator doors opened, and a group of executives walked out, laughing. I froze. Among them was David Thorne, a structural engineer I had collaborated with on the Grandhurst Foundation. We had shared coffee, discussed our families, and celebrated birthdays. "David," I called out instinctively, forgetting my place. He stopped. The laughter died in his throat as he looked down at me. He took in the mop, the blue jumpsuit, and my hair tied back in a messy bun. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by something worse: disgust. "Do I know you?" he asked loudly, for the benefit of his colleagues. "It's me." "Elena," I whispered, gripping the handle of the buffer until my knuckles turned white. He turned his back on me. "Let's go. Gentlemen, the cleaning staff is getting chatty." I stood there as they walked away, the sound of their expensive leather shoes clicking on the floor I had just polished. I felt something inside me shatter, a humiliation so profound it made it hard to breathe. I retreated to the basement archives to hide my tears and finish my shift. My job was to organize boxes of old invoices and discarded schematics. It was dusty, silent work. I picked up a crate marked for the shredder, and a roll of blueprints fell out, hitting the concrete floor with a hollow thud. I sighed and bent down to pick it up. The paper was yellowed, dating back nearly a decade. I unrolled it absent-mindedly. My breath hitched. It was a diagram of a neural network architecture. At the bottom right corner, in my own handwriting from my college days, were the words Project Genesis, Independent Prototype. I stared at the lines and nodes. This wasn't just a drawing. This was the source code structure I had written 2 years before I even met Preston. I had brought it with me when we merged our assets, but we never formally transferred the IP rights because we were busy planning the wedding. I had assumed Genesis was absorbed into the Grandhurst portfolio. But here it was, in a box of personal effects I had moved into storage years ago and forgotten about a box that ended up in this cheap logistics warehouse because this company handled Grandhurst's overflow storage. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. If this document was here, it meant the legal transfer never happened. It meant the foundation of the Aura system, the brain of the $2 billion tower, was built on a code that didn't belong to Grandhurst Corporation. It belonged to me. I sprinted back to my dingy apartment, clutching the roll of blueprints against my chest like a shield. My old laptop, a relic from my college days that I had luckily kept in a separate storage bin, wheezed as I booted it up. The screen flickered, but the hard drive held. I navigated through folders I had not opened in a decade, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I found it. Genesis E license. Agreement E final. PDF. I opened the document, scrolling past the technical jargon until I reached Section 4, Paragraph B. There it was, in black and white, a clause I had inserted to protect my intellectual property before I was blinded by Preston's charm. The licensor grants the licensee a non-exclusive, non-transferable right to use the source code for a period of 5 years. Upon expiration, all rights revert solely to the licensor unless a renewal fee is processed. I checked the date. I counted the days on my fingers, my breath catching in my throat. The 5-year mark had passed exactly 14 days ago. They forgot. I whispered to the empty room, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my chest. They were so busy kicking me out, they forgot to pay the rent on the software. The Grandhurst Tower, the $2 billion smart building that was currently the toast of New York, was operating its entire nervous system on pirated software, and I was the only person on Earth with the activation key. I looked at my bank account. I had barely enough money for rent and food for the next month. I took a deep breath and made the most reckless financial decision of my life. I transferred every single cent I had earned scrubbing toilets to the account of Juliana Fox, the most ruthless intellectual property lawyer in the city. Her hourly rate was extortionate, but I needed a shark. The next morning, I walked into the glass-walled reception of Fox & Associates. I was still wearing my work boots and a cheap coat I had found at a thrift store. The receptionist wrinkled her nose as I approached, clearly ready to call security. "I have an appointment," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hands. "Elena Vance to see Juliana Fox." I paid in advance. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Juliana. She was a striking woman with sharp eyes that seemed to dissect me. She glanced at the clock, clearly annoyed. "You have 1 hour. Ms. Vance," Juliana said, not bothering to hide her skepticism as she eyed my worn-out clothes. And I usually do not take cases from walk-ins. Make it quick. I didn't say a word. I simply slid the printed patent documents and the expired licensing agreement across her polished ebony desk. Juliana sighed, picked up the papers with 2 fingers as if they were dirty, and began to read. I watched her face. For the first 2 minutes, she was bored. Then, she stopped. She adjusted her glasses. She flipped back to the first page, then to the signature line, then back to the date. She looked up at me, and the boredom was gone. In its place was the predatory gleam of a hunter who just spotted a wounded gazelle. "This is the source code for the Grandhurst Tower," she stated, her voice dropping an octave. "The Aura system." "It is," I replied. "And as of 2 weeks ago, they are using it illegally." Juliana stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline where the Grandhurst Tower pierced the clouds. She turned back to me, a slow, terrifying smile spreading across her face. "Do you have any idea what you are holding here?" Juliana asked, her composure slipping into pure adrenaline. "Based on the current valuation of green tech and the operational dependency of that building, if we factor in the daily infringement penalties and the market value of the exclusive license..." She slammed her hand down on the desk, making me jump. "This is worth at least $48 million, and that is a conservative estimate. We could bury them. Elena, we could bury them under so much litigation they won't be able to breathe." I felt the heavy weight of the last month lift off my shoulders, the shame of the pawn shop, the smell of the bleach, the cold nights it all crystallized into a weapon. I stood up and pulled off the heavy, ugly coat, revealing my spine straight and strong. "I don't want a settlement. Juliana," I said, my voice cold and hard as steel. "I don't want them to just pay. I want them to realize that the ground they walk on belongs to me." "What is the goal then?" she asked, leaning forward. "I want them to kneel," I said. "I want them to beg me to take their money." The courier delivered the cease and desist order to Victoria Grandhurst's desk at precisely 9 o'clock on Monday morning. It was a thick, heavy document, bound in the terrifyingly formal stationery of Fox & Associates. We did not just ask for money. We demanded an immediate halt to the unauthorized use of the Aura operating system. Their reaction was exactly what Juliana predicted. They laughed. By noon, a junior associate from their legal team, a boy who looked like he had just graduated law school, called Juliana. He sounded bored. "We are prepared to offer Ms. Vance a nuisance fee of $5,000 to go away," he said. "If she persists with this, blackmail. We will sue her for defamation." I was sitting in Juliana's office, listening on the speakerphone. Juliana looked at me and winked. "Proceed with Phase 2, she said, and hung up on him. We did not sue them in court immediately. Instead, we went for the jugular. We sent infringement notices to the App Store, the cloud server providers, and the security vendors that hosted the Aura interface. We informed them that they were hosting stolen property and would be liable for damages if they did not suspend service. At 2 in the afternoon, the chaos began. Because the Grandhurst Tower had not received the valid security handshake from my master license, the automated systems went into defensive lockdown. The high-speed elevators, the pride of the building, froze between the 40th and 41st floors. The smart climate control system, unable to verify the occupancy sensors, shut down completely. Inside the glass-walled penthouses, the temperature began to rise. The billionaires and celebrities who lived there found themselves trapped in sweltering glass boxes, unable to leave because the biometric door locks had defaulted to safe mode, which meant they were sealed shut. My phone began to blow up with alerts. The tenant forums were screaming. Real estate blogs reported that 3 sales in the tower had fallen through within the hour. The secondary market value of a Grandhurst apartment dropped by 8% in a single afternoon. That evening, my phone rang. The screen displayed a face I used to love, Preston. I set the recording app to on and answered. "Elena, Darling, Preston said, his voice dripping with a sickly sweet concern that made my stomach turn. I heard about the misunderstanding with the lawyers. Why didn't you call me first? I am talking to you now. Preston, I said, keeping my voice flat. Look, we don't need to get the courts involved, he said. This is family business. Why don't you come to dinner? Just the two of us. We can work this out. I can write you a check for, well, for whatever reasonable amount you need to get back on your feet. You mean the money for the license you stole? I asked. He sighed, the mask slipping for a second. Elena, don't be dramatic. We just forgot the paperwork. It's a technicality I pressed, knowing exactly which buttons to push. You knew the license was in my name. Preston. You signed the merger documents. You saw the exclusion clause. There was a pause, and then his arrogance got the better of him. Honestly, Elena, we knew, but Mother said we shouldn't worry about it. She said you were too emotional and too stupid to ever check the fine print. We thought you'd just fade away. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. I see. Thank you for clarifying that. Preston. So, dinner, he asked, hopeful. I'll see you in court, I said, and ended the call. 10 minutes later, I uploaded the audio file to every social media platform I had. I titled it simply, "The Visionary of the Year Speaks." The internet did the rest. Within an hour, the clip had 2 million views. The hashtag, "Too Stupid to Notice," began trending worldwide. The narrative shifted instantly. I was no longer the bitter ex-wife who was fired for incompetence. I was the brilliant architect who had been used, discarded, and underestimated by a family of thieves. The court of public opinion had just delivered its verdict, and for the Grandhursts, it was guilty. The financial bleeding started on Wall Street, but the death blow came from the server room. The morning after my recording went viral, 3 major institutional investors pulled their funding from the Grandhurst Group. By noon, the Securities and Exchange Commission had formally suspended the company's initial public offering pending a fraud investigation. The $2 billion valuation evaporated like mist. Inside the tower, panic had set in. According to the server logs I could still access remotely, Monica decided she was going to be the hero, desperate to prove she was more than just a trophy. She entered the main mainframe room with an administrative override key, attempting to bypass my encryption. She did not know that I had written a catastrophic failsafe into the code for exactly this kind of clumsy tampering. I was sitting in a coffee shop across the street when it happened. One moment. The Grandhurst Tower was a beacon of light piercing the night sky. The next, it vanished. Monica had tripped the kill switch. Every light, every elevator, every heating unit, and every security camera in the 80-story building died instantly. The tower became a black monolith, a tomb of glass and steel. Victoria Grandhurst was forced to hold an emergency press conference on the steps of the darkened building, illuminated only by the harsh flash of news cameras. This is merely a minor technical hiccup, Victoria stammered, her usual iron composure cracking. We are rebooting the system as we speak. Mrs. Grandhurst, a reporter from the Times, shouted. Is this hiccup because Elena Vance revoked your license? Is the building unsafe? We are in full control. Victoria shrieked, her voice breaking. She was not in control. I used the momentum of their collapse to rise. I registered my new company, Vance Innovations, and walked into the boardroom of Archtech, Grandhurst's fiercest competitor. I did not have to beg. The CEO stood up and shook my hand the moment I entered. They knew that I was the brain behind the magic. We will give you $15 million for a 20% stake, the CEO said. And we want exclusive rights to whatever you build next. Deal, I said. With the capital secured, I made my first executive decision. I pulled up the list of employees that Monica had fired in her first-month senior engineers she felt threatened by, architects who dared to correct her, and loyal staff who had asked about me. I sent out mass offer letters. Within 24 hours, My new office was filled with familiar faces. There were tears and hugs, but mostly, there was a fierce hunger for retribution. We weren't just a company, we were a resistance. Welcome home, I told them. Now, let's build something better. We worked around the clock to launch Pulse, a building management system that was faster, smarter, and 40% cheaper than Aura. We marketed it aggressively to every landlord in the city who was watching the Grandhurst disaster unfold. Contracts flooded in. While we celebrated our launch with cheap pizza and expensive wine, the gavel came down. Juliana called me on Friday afternoon. The judge just signed the emergency injunction, Juliana said, her voice trembling with excitement. It is an ultimatum. The Grandhurst Group has exactly 48 hours to reach a settlement with you. If they don't, the court authorizes a permanent, hardware-level shutdown of the Aura system. The building will be legally condemned as uninhabitable. I looked out the window at the blacked-out tower across the skyline. 48 hours, I repeated. Let them sweat. They are already calling. Juliana laughed. Victoria left 3 voicemails. She sounds hysterical. She wants to know what you want. Don't answer yet, I said, leaning back in my chair. Let them sit in the dark a little longer. It helps with the clarity of thought. We met in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of Juliana's firm. The air conditioning was humming, but the tension in the room made the air feel thick and heavy. I sat at the head of the table, flanked by Juliana. Opposite us sat the remnants of the Grandhurst dynasty. Preston looked like a ghost of the man who had preened on stage just weeks ago. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark purple circles, and his suit, usually tailored to perfection, hung loosely on his frame. Victoria sat beside him, her spine stiff, trying to project her usual imperious dominance. But I saw the truth. I saw the way her manicured fingers twitched against the mahogany table.